As a consequence of this general feature of the way the mind works and the feature of the environments of our ancestors, we can expect that many of the blades in that Swiss Army knife, many of the adaptations produced by natural selection that constitute our minds, will exhibit negativity bias. That is, that those mechanisms will attend more strongly to negative events than to positive events, and they'll guide our behavior correspondingly more directly in response to negative than to positive events. I'm going to set that aside for just a moment and talk a bit about culture, and then I'll weave those 2 points together. So, we're not a particularly formidable species. We're not exceptionally large. We're not exceptionally fast. We don't have big teeth. We're not very strong. On the range of sort of capabilities among large and successful animals in the world, we're actually pretty pathetic. And yet we have populated the planet. We occupy virtually every ecosystem with the exception of the deep sea. And we're so successful as a species that we endanger our own existence and indeed that of everything else on the planet by virtue of things like climate change or nuclear war, right? How did we get to be so successful? What is it? What are the hallmarks of our species that allow this incredible proliferation? And the answer is culture. And by culture, I mean here socially transmitted information about the world that guides our behavior. And critically, the process of cultural evolution, that is change in the composition of that information set over time, parallels biological evolution. It has many similarities to biological evolution, but it isn't identical with biological evolution. And critically, that body of information that any one society amasses includes enormous amounts of very, very important practical information about how to solve adaptive challenges in the environment. So you see here 2 men, members of the Jutoisi group in sub-Saharan Africa. They're on a hunt. On the right here, you see an archival photo of an Inuit man with his kayak. And at the bottom, you see incredible terraced rice fields in Southeast Asia. These are all examples of the way that culture has amassed stores of information that create technological and informational solutions to adaptive challenges. These things are incredibly complicated, right? Naval architects are still studying just what it is about Inuit kayaks that makes them so incredibly efficient, right? They have very low coefficients of drag. They're extremely stable, right? This is a bladder for a harpoon, the bladder made from a seal skin, right? This is amazing technology and knowledge about the environment. These Jutoisi hunters can find game, sources of water in places that would be completely invisible even to an expert ecologist in that environment, right? And understanding how to terrace the fields so that water is properly distributed, so that erosion is properly contained, so that the conditions for rice flourishing are maximized. This is incredibly complicated information. And it exists by virtue of the incremental improvement over generational time by many, many minds acting together, okay? So critically, our success as a species depends on acquiring and exploiting and transmitting cultural information, okay? Now, by virtue of the fact that culture is so important in our success as individuals in any one society and our success as communities, the result is that natural selection has acted on the human mind in a snowballing fashion with the value of cultural information to create specialized mechanisms. Some of the blades in that Swiss Army knife exist exclusively for the purposes of allowing us to acquire cultural information and to shape the way that we learn from others, we retain that information, and so on. And there are many, many, many different such specialized mechanisms, including our remarkable abilities to imitate, to infer intention through observation, to detect relative differences among prospective models with regard to their success at a task, and so on, right? These are all blades in the Swiss Army knife that exist for the purposes of acquiring cultural information.